Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Forgotten Generation podcast with your host, Troy. With me in today's episode is the disability activist, content creator, and previously a vice president of diversity and wellbeing, and also a student president as well. Kira, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ciara. I make content over on Instagram, TikTok, and sometimes Facebook. And I make content around being disabled. Some of it's quite funny, some of it's quite serious. And yeah, I'm not very consistent on my posts, but I think it's quite funny.
Lovely to have you, Kira. And so, what is your youth social action journey?
So my journey actually started when I was about 15. I started volunteering at a deaf children's society, mainly as a part of Duke of Edinburgh, but I really loved it because I wanted to see young children flourish and do very well in school. And I felt like I became a safe space for those students and went on to win an award for that. And then COVID happened in the middle of that volunteering, so I was kind of left in my house with nothing to do, and the National Session Society reached out to me. So from 16 to maybe 17, and later on, I was with the National Session doing campaigning. We did it about deaf mental health during the pandemic and how we should have a deaf CAMS, which obviously never happened. And then after that, I was involved in a campaign around clear maths, which obviously lasted for like a month because everyone then wasn't wearing masks anymore. And then I just worked on being education activist because by the time I had wrapped up my work with NGCS, I was actually leaving high school and I didn't really have a positive high school experience due to the fact that I was physically disabled in a mainstream school. So I started in my last year campaigning for more disability awareness. I started it in my school at a wee club called the Inclusivist, which was very popular. Like my school now, my former school, now is taking on that work in educating students and making sure students are involved in the decisions that are being made. And then, so I did that, and then left high school, went to college, spoke at party conferences, got involved in IWell that year, was doing a lot more around inclusive education, making sure that everyone has that equal say in their education, then became VP and spent a year behind the scenes trying to make sure that college is accessible, and then for some god known reason I decided to go for student president. I got it, which was quite a surprise because I was the first physically disabled student president, so there was a lot of challenges that they weren't aware that disabled students would go through. Now I can actually talk about the work that I've done now. I did a lot of work around making sure disabled students were in the centre of the discussion. So in my last few months, I set up a advisory group with autistic young people to talk about why they don't get involved in student politics, student unions, stuff like that. It gave me quite a lot of insight into autism and the different varieties of autism, because obviously I'm autistic, but I'm very much I've always been around my cerebral palsy and my deafness, because my autism is very much linked into both of them. So I had such a different experience in my autism compared to students that were just autistic. So that was a really amazing moment. And then as a final, I'm done, I'm not coming back. I got the virus fixed at my college because I couldn't get through the virus, so I kept getting hit Have you used the scanning bios before? Like,
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
yeah. So that we had that in my college, but obviously because they're really quick, they would just shut on wheelchair users because we're below where the like cameras, so the scanner wouldn't recognise wheelchair users, and a lot of our brain students kept also getting hit by them. So I was like, this is not okay. So I timed it. It was from the bio opening, it was 4 seconds, which means you'll be in the opening by the time you go to wheel. It's again, and you have to keep doing that over and over and over again. So the columns were like, oh, that should not be happening. They came down, saw it for themselves, and they were like, this is actually illegal. But I was like, thank you. So in my last, like, it was literally my last week, they were like, we fixed it. And I was like, have you know? I tried it out, and I was like, oh, can't believe that this is like the last thing I'm leaving with is the fact that which has affected me for like 3 years of the college life, and then I'm like, man, there's so many other things that could have got fixed, but I did that. So now I'm going to uni. I'm going to take a wee bit of a break. I don't think I'm going to take that much of a break, but a wee bit of a break from studying politics and junior life, and yeah. But on my social media, I'm constantly being like, "Ugh, imagine if education was more accessible, then maybe we could get more people involved." So,
Absolutely. I love that because, like, and I've
mm,
absolutely seen your on your social media. You're very much making that big difference, like, and championing people's voices and that. And you've done a lot of things, like, and your journey's been amazing. And you're off to uni, which is exciting. And so, like, what has made you inspired to have a voice and make you who you are today?
a lot of this is my mum. My mum was always advocating for me, and it got to a point where I was in high school, and a lot of conversations were being had where I wasn't involved. And I was like, wait, no, I should absolutely have the same what I'm needed and what support I need. So a lot of that stemmed from like just not being a part of the conversation, not getting to choose what my transition was, because essentially from high school to college, I was just abandoned. We were in the middle of the pandemic, but this is like the after effect of COVID, that like a 17-year-old who has never been outside of the school before, cannot cross a road, has never learned how to independently travel, is now expected to go to college full time. I know how to do all the things that make them independent. And I was like, but I don't know how to do these things. I don't know how to write a college application. I don't know how to manage my money properly. I don't know how to be just an independent adult in the world. And the school just kind of left me to it. Like, I was applying for colleges and no one was helping me. And I was like, there has to be something done about this, because in no way should it ever be that the young people are being left behind, that we should absolutely just be there. But mom was the one that was like, no, like, Kira needs to be in these conversations. But I'm like trying to advocate for myself medically. My mum has all the answers, and she actually says, no, Kira knows this answer. Talk to Kira. Because she's just prepared me really well for like being not listened to, that I deserve to have a louder voice. But my parents are very much the people that started me being like, no, actually, I actually have a voice. You should listen to me, not them. But you probably know more than me, but
Yeah, I love that. And because I think very much like helped you in that journey of being who you are and having that voice and made you inspired. And that's important. But also you said about challenges of being like a young adult with money and and is that a barrier in your journey? And is that something that you found hard to create change as a young person and trying to be a young adult who has a disability, trying to manage that money and like living?
It was quite scary. I think I'm very good. My mum might disagree, but I think I've gone better at saving. But the one thing I am not very good at is knowing that how much things cost. And that's the thing I've really struggled with even growing up, is just understanding you can get things for cheaper. I'm like, no, but I want that right now. And it's really hard to like battle my autism, which is like, but we need this right now. And then there's me vastly being like, but we don't need that right now. We could wait 5, 6 months down the line and we wouldn't need that. It's very hard to rationalize while you're in the middle of a meltdown being like, but I have the money. And everyone's like, but money, money is a finite thing, but it's very hard to understand. And the thing is really scary about it is that I'm living into a flat. Yeah, so I'm even more scared of like how to manage that and how exhausting. Like I worked a full-time job, I worked a part-time job, and it's really weird to go from that to now not working anymore. Like I work, but I don't always get paid for it, and it is a concept because also before when I started doing this activism, I wasn't getting paid. I just was freelance, wasn't getting paid. To now come full circle and experience that type of freedom, and now not having that freedom is such a weird concept. And I think a lot of disabled people experience that, where they get a job, their jobs are great, and then they realise very quickly they can't get another job because they're disabled, which means they're either stuck at awful job or they just can't get a job anywhere else, so they end up unemployed. I'm very lucky that because of the work I've done, I can get into like jobs that most non-disabled people can get into, but that absolutely should not be the case. That because I have more experience, have done everything I could do, that someone else with a disability probably wouldn't get the same job as me. So that type of like privilege has been like a weird thing to navigate, of being like, oh, what do you mean it's not common for like people my age not being in a job because you're disabled? And yeah, there's like yeah, I think the opportunities that came with the job that I did is definitely like a once in a lifetime thing. But then going from that, people being so understanding to what to like finding jobs and people just rejecting you because you're disabled is quite a surprise to me, because I was like, people were like, yeah, you'll be amazing VP, you'll be amazing president. So then going to apply for like a full-time social media person and then getting rejected off the back of it, and you're like, is it because I put in that I'm disabled? And you know it's because of that. And you're like, why? I could do this job.
Yes, I think that's very much a big a barrier of getting a job as someone who is disabled and managing money. And there's so much barriers that young people face who is disabled, and I can very much relate to that, and I get it. And I think more needs to and be done in that. As that leads me to my next question of what are the three issues you think young people are facing right now, and what do you want the government and professionals working with young people to do better?
It, at what used to be fixed. I went for the access to work process twice, and my experience was just awful. The first time it was the day I was just getting taxis. I was paying loads of money out of pocket for taxis because that's the only way I can accessibly travel is taxis. I can't go on a bus. I live in not the middle of nowhere, but the buses here are like very few here, and I would have to get up really early to get a bus, and that's not accessible for me. So I got taxis. And then in my second year, because I was in full-time employment, was when I was constantly in meetings every single day. I had to have a BSL interpreter. And that was a whole experience that I had never experienced before about like autism, deafness and physical disabilities conflicting with each other. But I needed taxes, but also needed a sign language interpreter, and then there was not enough money for me to do both, so I had to ration what one I needed more, but it's ridiculous. Like the concept that a disabled person who's in full-time employment has to ration how many meetings they can go to in a week because they also rely on public transport, getting them to and from places, and there's not enough money to cover both. It's absolutely ridiculous. And at points, they were like telling me, do you really need a sign language interpreter? I was like, sitting there like, yes, because I'm coming out of meetings and being like, what the hell did he just say? Because I'm pretty sure it's important for me to know. So once I got it, it was fine. And now things are going the opposite way of access to account paying. Does that mean that I have to pay these taxi companies, these sign language companies, because they're not paying? It's just like feels like a revolving door situation, and that is probably why young people are not going into jobs because processes like access to work are becoming so increasingly challenging that it is just putting a barrier into work. There's already a barrier getting into work that employers can refuse you, but then now there's an extra barrier that if you can't get into work, your employer then expects you to pay for you to get into work. How how do you think that's going to go? Because I don't think my employer would want to pay for like a £10 taxi to
Forget
my
it, yeah.
job.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that is a big issue, like, and getting jobs and like accessibility and that. Yeah, I just think there's just so much things I think like government and professionals need to do better and with disabled young people because there's so much issues that we're facing, like about adulthood and the education system. Like, there's so many different topics I can say, like I'm preparing for adulthood, mental health, all of those type of things. But like
Yeah.
professionals are not listening to us young people who are disabled.
And that's almost going to be challenged. One does an amazing campaign for access to work, which is called Access to Nowhere, where people are applying for access to work aren't getting it, and well, they are getting it, but not until they're like 6 months into their job. That means that they've been 6 months without any support. How are young people expected to get into the workforce? Like, it's already hard enough. You're struggling to get into education. You've graduated. You now have a degree that you've just had to fight for every single step of the way. You have that degree, well done. Now it's time to fight the government, and you have to fight the government to pay you to go into work. Now, people think that it's actually we're using taxpayers' money, whatever. That's a whole debate that I cannot be bothered to get into. But the one thing that Access to Work makes sure if young people are getting into work, that we are able to contribute to the society we live in. The whole situation with PIP, I have to clarify something. PIP um is not a out of work benefit. actually helps people stay in work. And the whole trying to cut PIP and stuff like that, then they're trying to cut access to work. There's this whole mentality of disabled people are lazy and we don't want to get into work, but then restricting the very processes that let us work. I could rant all day about the
I could as
issues.
well. I could as well. I think there's so much issue that young people are facing. I think professionals and government really need to take accountability in that, especially with the disability aspect of things. And so, what would be your advice to a young person wanting to make a difference but don't know how to?
I think get involved in a local charity. I think like go on social media. You could do either one or two things. Getting involved in a local charity probably will give you a wee bit of an insight into how the charity sector works. Because interestingly enough, the charity sector works differently than the activism sector. While they're still advocating for young disabled people, the way they advocate is in a very different way. But if you are physically advocating on social media, you don't really get to see how charities work. And I've seen a lot of charities, how they work, how they gave me quite a lot of insight into my own activism of, okay, so for me to do all these stuff, I need to be quite persistent, but I also need to be quite laid back and make sure that my story's being heard. I also try and make sure that I'm constantly working with the charity. Like, I'm not really working with a charity this time around just because timing and stuff. But I was like involved in Cerebral Palsy Scotland, I was involved in NGCS, I was involved in like I Will, which is a charity, I was involved with like Hope Parks, I was involved in that. That one was like pure coincidence. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to go for that, and I got I Will. I was like, two hats. So yeah, get involved in charity sector, things like posting on social media. One that being annoying is actually quite fun. Like, there's also that social anxiety element that I have where I hate being on camera and I'm like, actually, I'll just film myself out about it. If I watch a video, then I'll post on TikTok and I'm like, that's my activism done for today.
I love
Go
that.
back to my normal day. Because sometimes activism can be a wee bit silly, it can be not serious. I think people are very much, we have to constantly be campaigning the government. And I'm like, no, you can post a silly or video and being like, I just wish disabled people had equal rights. Do you know this is a way you can get involved in X, Y, and Z? And that's literally all I do. I post that. I'm like, well, that's a good enough video. Yes. Minutes was thing. And I think we need to be somewhat very more relaxed in how we advocate because it's fun to be a wee bit silly, to be a wee bit funny, and not take things seriously. Like a lot of my friends, so I run two social medias. I run a rugby club, and I run my one. Um, and my friend was like, you can really tell who's running it. Because there's social media you who's trying to like promote the organisation and blah blah. And then there's like your actual account where you're like, disability is just so funny. And my friend's like, they're just the polar opposites of you. And I'm like, well, my activism has to be silly. Like, I feel like it grabs people's attention that you're sitting there being like, I'm gonna do a dancing video. I'm gonna tell you all about this and I'm gonna go and probably not look at my phone for the next 4 hours and come back and be like, yes, I did post that. That's quite funny. There's a few videos that I posted. I've not actually thought about the humour in it and I'll come back to it. I'm like busting out laughing because I'm like, why did I think that? Why did I do that? And people are like laughing in the comments. I'm like, that's funny comedy. But I'm also not a serious person. Have never been very sarcastic. So
That's good.
that's my rules for young people today.
I
Be
love that.
sarcastic, be funny, don't take things seriously. Post on social media. I would say don't give any F's about what people think about you.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. And such amazing tips, I'm sure, and my listeners will take on board and that, and to very much make a difference in their community and wider. And so the last thing is, what would be a Forgotten Generation podcast quote to sum up your journey?
There's many. Why don't you give me one?
Okay, and I'll give you a quote, and I'll say, never give up on what you believe in. Just because you've got a disability, you can conquer the world.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was very much on the same lines of like, try again. Don't give up. Type quote. But yours was very put together. Mine was like, don't give up. Keep going. But
absolutely.
yeah, it's a
Like, and yours,
beautiful.
yes, and yours was good. That's it for today's episode today. But thank you so much, Akira, for coming on to really and empower lots of young people wanting to make a difference in their communities, but also on the journey you're on as well.
Thank you.
Please support the podcast by subscribing and rating the podcast. I'd love to hear what you like and what could be better for future episodes. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram and iwill.troy, and also on X, iwill_Troy. Tune in to next week's episode.